The United States is about to invade Iran, not in theory, not in some distant scenario, but right now, as you are watching this. The forces are assembled, the final units are arriving, and according to intelligence analysts, there is no turning back. And that is just the beginning. Today we are also covering the twin economic shock that is already hammering markets worldwide, why oil just blew past $100 a barrel, the 8 million Americans who took to the streets saying they have had enough, and a Supreme Court case that could redefine what it means to be born American. Stay with me because the most important part is at the end. But first, if you find value in honest, fact-checked reporting, hit that subscribe button and consider using super thanks. We spend hours researching and verifying every story so you get the truth, not spin. Your support keeps this channel independent. Now here is what we know about the invasion. Open source intelligence indicates that the United States has effectively completed the concentration of forces needed for a ground operation in Iran. The necessary units are assembled and the remaining forces are arriving at their positions as we speak. Analysts say the decision has been made and there is no reversal. The scale of the operation is still being debated, but here is the critical factor most people are missing. The real decision maker right now is not in Washington, it is in Beijing. China is reportedly the key player whose stance will determine how this unfolds, and that should worry everyone. The Treasury Secretary went on Fox News and said, quote, "Over time, the United States will restore control over the Straits, whether through an American escort or a multinational escort." Did you catch the key phrase? Over time. That is a quiet admission that there is no quick solution here. And the mention of a multinational escort? That is a signal that America recognizes the limits of its own capabilities. Controlling the Straits may require a coalition, which puts the country at the mercy of the very allies it has been pushing away. Think about it for a second. You cannot burn bridges and then ask people to help you cross the river. Meanwhile, there is a fascinating twist. Ukraine is emerging as what some call the Great Equalizer, a nation that went from having its fate decided by others to becoming a key player, shaping outcomes not just in Europe, but now in the Middle East. That is a remarkable transformation, regardless of where you stand. But wait, that is not all. While the military builds up, the president is playing a very different game on the diplomatic front. He threatened Iran with, and I quote, "the complete destruction of energy infrastructure," meaning power plants, oil wells, and the island of Karg. At the same time, he announced he is negotiating with a more reasonable regime and that a deal will be struck soon. So let me get this straight. He is simultaneously threatening to destroy everything, claiming negotiations are going well, and announcing a deal is imminent. In clinical terms, that is called flight of ideas. In geopolitics, apparently, it is called the art of the deal. As a gesture of goodwill, Iran allowed 20 tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But military operations against Iranian targets continued, and Pakistan has offered itself as a mediator between Washington and Tehran. The troop count on the ground has reached 50,000. Thousands of soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division are arriving in the region. When you threaten to destroy desalination plants in a desert country, that is no longer a military operation. That is something else entirely. And here is where it gets even more dangerous. European officials report that Iran is actively pushing its Houthi allies in Yemen to resume their campaign against shipping in the Red Sea. This creates a second choke point for global oil trade. Until now, the crisis was centered on the Strait of Hormuz, through which 12 to 15 million barrels of oil pass every single day. Saudi Arabia built an east-west pipeline to the Red Sea port of Yanbu decades ago for exactly this kind of emergency. But if the Houthis block the strait near the coast of Yemen, that backup route becomes useless too. Insurance premiums for Red Sea routes have already skyrocketed. Ship owners are refusing to send tankers into the danger zone. You see where this is going, right? Iran is methodically closing one strait after another. Soon the only safe way to deliver oil will be teleportation, and that is driving prices through the roof. Brent crude is at $107, West Texas at $102. Gold has broken through $4,500. Asian stock markets are heading for their worst month since the financial crisis. This is not a blip. This is a structural shock, Sarah. And this is exactly what the economic data is now confirming. According to major financial outlets, the war with Iran has triggered a dual blow to the global economy, rising inflation and slowing growth at the same time. Stagflation, the nightmare scenario. Asian economies, from South Korea to India, are bearing the brunt of the energy shock. The Fed chair spoke at Harvard and said that inflation expectations remain anchored, and the central bank is not yet planning to raise rates. His colleague at the New York branch expects inflation to hit about 2.75% by year-end, with tariffs adding another half to a full percentage point. On prediction markets, the probability of a rate hike this year sits at roughly 1 in 5. Aluminum posted its largest monthly gain in nearly 2 years after strikes hit production facilities in the Gulf states. African economies are facing a fuel crisis as a direct consequence of the conflict. The Fed chair says the central bank is well positioned to handle the energy shock. Well positioned, like a passenger on the Titanic who happens to have a good seat. He also gave 2 pieces of advice to his successor. First, stick strictly to the Fed's mandate, maximum employment and price stability, and resist pressure to expand its role. Second, do not seek perfection. Considering that the current administration is expanding everything it can get its hands on, from tariffs to military operations, that advice sounds almost naive. Now let me tell you what is happening on the streets. The third wave of the No Kings protest movement swept across the country. According to organizers, more than 8 million people participated, a record in recent years. This followed the first wave last summer and the second one in the fall. The epicenters were Chicago, New York, and other major cities. The core demands: preventing the concentration of executive power, criticizing immigration policy, and pushing back against what many see as authoritarian overreach. But this time there is a new element. Anti-war sentiment, fueled by the conflict with Iran, has joined the mix. One participant said, "This is a terrible time for the country. Being here is our duty." Another traveled across the country and said it was encouraging to see so many people who share the same values. 8 million people came out to say that kings are not welcome in America. The White House probably did not notice. They were busy planning the next deal of the century. And finally, the Supreme Court is about to take on one of the most fundamental questions in American law. It will review the constitutionality of the executive order on birthright citizenship, the principle that anyone born on American soil is automatically a citizen. The order was signed in the early days of the current presidential term and is being challenged as a violation of the 14th Amendment. That amendment has survived the Civil War reconstruction and over a century and a half of constitutional practice. The question now is whether it will survive this presidency. A ruling against birthright citizenship could affect millions of people and fundamentally reshape what it means to be American. And that, right there, is the kind of story that will define this era far longer than any war or oil shock. If you made it this far, you already know this channel does not do surface-level coverage. Every story you just heard was researched, cross-referenced, and verified. That takes time and it takes resources. If you believe independent journalism matters, the simplest thing you can do is hit like and subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm to show this video to more people. And if you want to go further, consider becoming a channel sponsor or using the Super Thanks button below. Every bit of support helps us stay independent and keep doing this work. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share what surprised you most today, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for being part of this community.